So much for our webinar today. We are talking about Monash's recent changes, their updates on kind of what is moving around in that space and how that will impact you. Just as a heads up, I do have my little murder Muppets here with me today. They are fully bribed with peanut butter, so we are going to wish for the best, but they have two settings, adorable and apocalyptic, and we never quite know which ones we're going to get. So everyone say a quick little prayer and we will go ahead and get started. Now, first things first, if you have any questions or comments, you are more than welcome to drop them in the chat. But what we're going to do is a little bit of housekeeping first. If you go over to your chat on your phone or on your computer, right now it is set to hosts and panelists. I want you to go ahead and switch that to everyone. So again, it's going to start as hosts and panelists. I want you to switch that for everybody to everyone so that everyone can see your questions, your comments, in case they want to write them down when we get back to them later. I do sort of scoop my chat out of the way while I'm doing the webinar, just because it's a little bit distracting with it popping up. And I have enough trouble with my little squirrel brain, but I will be coming back to the chat afterwards. And so you are more than welcome to leave your questions or comments there. You are more than welcome to say hi to each other, say hi to me. I love when you guys engage. I love when you ask questions. We are here to learn together. And so let's do that, okay? So let's get started. Oh, sorry. In case we haven't met before, hi, my name is Amy, and I am a Monash certified IBS health coach. I work with women who feel like IBS is kind of taking over their bodies. I help them create a clear and simple strategy to help take back control of their lives. So like I said, today we are talking about Monash's recent updates. Now, I was also on the elimination phase when this started, and so just as shocked as the rest of you trying to scramble and figure things out. And so I want you to know that this is not something that I take lightly. I really do understand how it can impact you, how it can feel confusing or frustrating or overwhelming. And I really do want to make sure that tonight we're really addressing that for you. So go ahead and shoot me anything you need to in the chat to make sure that we are clarifying things for you tonight. And I will do my best to circle back and answer all of your questions. Okay, so we're going to talk about three main things today, and that is what exactly did Monash change? Because they made a couple of funny changes. Some of them you got more things, some of them you get less things, some things just switched groups, which sounds super weird, but we're going to explain everything for you. So again, what Monash has changed, why all of these changes are actually happening all of a sudden, and then of course, how these changes are actually going to impact your symptom management strategy. Okay, so let's start with what actually changed. And this is not kind of like a comprehensive list. I went through and I tried to grab all of the things that I thought would be useful to you, or that if you didn't know about them might be impacting your low FODMAP diet. So I do encourage all of you to head back to your Monash app when we're done here, kind of take a cruise through. I'll show you where to look and see if there's any sort of niche or specialty items that I didn't talk about that impact your daily diet, okay? So let's start with the things that have changed and now you have less. It's just a handful of things. If you brought a pen and paper, great. If you didn't, I'm going to send everybody a replay of this webinar so you can go and grab a pen and paper later and write these down if you need to. Or again, you can just go through the Monash app and pull out the things that are important to you. Okay, so things that are now less are, first of all, red bell pepper. So this used to be on the eat freely list. It was a bit of a shocker. You know, you used to be able to eat it until you kind of threw up. I used to tell people, now we're having 1/3 of a cup, and that is raw. So you just cut up a pepper. You can have 1/3 of a cup now to be in that low FODMAP threshold. And that is per sitting, not per day. All FODMAPs, we talk about sittings, which is 3 to 5 hours. And that's just so that you're not having FODMAPs kind of collide in your digestive tract. We're giving them lots of space so that they're kind of going through as little units. So anytime you talk about somebody saying, you know, this is the low FODMAP serving, they mean in this 3 to 5 hour period. And it's going to kind of depend on how long it takes for your normal motility. So some people have a very fast gut, some people have a very slow gut. So that's something that you want to keep in mind when deciding how you're going to do your portion sizes. Okay, so we have red and green bell pepper. We have red and green grapes. So again, these used to be eat freely and now they are eat 6. Like what happened here? We're going to talk about this, I swear. So the serving now is not eat freely. It is very low. You get 6. They do have sort of, if you're not super sensitive to fructose, but it is something that you want to keep in mind. There are some higher servings that are like yellow, not quite red. So definitely, if you're interested in having grapes, if there's something that feels really important to you in your diet, make sure that you are diving into the app and kind of sussing out what is going to work for your unique body. Okay, so red bell red bell peppers, red and green grapes, strawberries. Again, it used to be on the free list. Now you can have 5 medium-sized strawberries. So like not those honking weird strawberries that you get. I had a strawberry ones the size of my hand, not those ones, just the regular size strawberries. 5 is the max. It used to be unlimited, but something has changed and now you can have 5. Another one that was a little bit weird was cherry tomatoes. You used to be able to have 5. Now you can have 3. So that's a little bit of a shocker, something that you definitely want to keep an eye on if you're at a restaurant, if you're making like appetizers or something. We do want to make sure that we're staying within that range because 5 is now moderately high, so that's a yellow. So the last one on this, we kind of now have less list, is common tomatoes. Some people ask me what common tomatoes are. Totally makes sense. In some places they would be called hothouse tomatoes. In some places they're called beefsteak tomatoes. Basically, if you think of like a cartoon tomato, those are the ones that we're talking about. They're big and fat. They got the nice little hat on. Those are the ones that we're talking about. When you see the picture in the Monash app, it's exactly what you think it is when you think of a tomato. So those used to be eat freely. Now they're capped at half a tomato, okay? So that's kind of our list of things that changed and you now have less than you used to. So it's red bell peppers, red and green grapes, strawberries, cherry tomatoes, and now common tomatoes. So there are also some things that have changed and now you get more. So I want to make sure that we're talking about these as well, because I know that like tomatoes and peppers and grapes and strawberries are getting a lot of attention right now online. They're getting a lot of attention, especially on Instagram with people making funny reels. I know they feel relatable, but we're not talking about the things that you got. And this was a really amazing update for things that were included, some things that we've been waiting for years for. People have been asking me about some of these foods, and I'm so excited that they're here. And I want us to make sure that we're having room for celebration as well as a little bit of disappointment. So for things that you now have more of, we now have more green bell peppers. So they used to be, I think it was like a third, maybe less of a pepper. Now you can have half a cup, again, raw. So if you just chopped it up and put it in a little cup, you get half a cup raw. The interesting thing though about green peppers is that they actually flipped groups. So green peppers used to be in the polio group. They are now in the fructan group. Super weird. We also have leeks. You used to have 3/4 of a cup, which meant you needed to do a little bit of math, depending on what you were making. If you were making a soup or you were making something where they were going to be like ground up and you couldn't really tell how much you were going to have, a little bit of math was involved. Now we're up to a cup. And I can't really think of anything on my website where a cup of leeks would end up in your body. They also don't have a limit anymore in the Monash app. They don't even list what group they're from. They used to be from polyols. But based on green peppers, we don't know if that's still true. But basically, what Monash said on their blog, like many years ago, is if they don't list which group it's from, basically you couldn't put enough of it in your body to trigger a FODMAP reaction. Like you would have just a digestive reaction from food volume before you would have like a notable FODMAP load. So it's interesting that leeks used to be like high FODMAP. Now they are almost eat freely. They're on that, like we're not going to negotiate a serving size with you, and we're not even going to tell you what group it's in if you didn't know already. So that's something that's also very interesting. So let's talk about the things that were added, because I want to make sure that these are on your radar, because again, some people have been asking me for these for years. So I am happy to announce they have arrived. So we have refried black beans. So those have been added. For people who can tolerate alcohol, we have brandy and tequila have finally been added. Breadcrumbs added. These are all low FODMAP foods, by the way. They've been added to the app. You can actually eat them. So we have breadcrumbs. So those are like panko crumbs. We have vegan cheese. So that's coconut based. Monash has also specified, it used to just call it like pecorino cheese, like really hard cheeses. Now they actually have Parmigiano. They have Parmesan in there. Chili peppers. They've tested habanero, jalapeno, and poblano. So those ones all have different serving sizes. So make sure that you're looking at the actual pepper that you're using. We have coconut cream, which is really great for baking. Fresh cranberries, which are really great for cranberry sauce or a snack. Leek bulbs have been retested, and you can now have a small serving of that white part of a leek. And the reason that this is important to note is that now when you're at a restaurant or something and you ask for like the green part of a leek, you don't have to be as concerned if the person didn't hear you or didn't quite understand and you notice a little bit of that white bulb on your plate. You can just kick it to the side. And even if you eat a little bit by accident, like most likely no harm done because there is a low FODMAP serving size of that now. We have muesli, arborio rice, cured sausage, great for a snack, great for lunch ideas. We have hard taco shells, and wait for it, wheat tortillas. Oh my gosh, I've been waiting for this since 2016. They finally tested wheat tortillas. You can have one, but that means you can walk into any restaurant and have a wrap, because you can always, like, they're made to order, you can change what's in a wrap. So go ahead, hit your Subway, hit your local, whatever. You can have one wheat tortilla. The cutoff for that is 52 grams, which I did a little bit of Googling, seems to be a standard tortilla size. So some good has been done here. I know that this update kind of threw everybody for a bit of a loop, but I want to really draw your attention to the things that you got, because the things that we got, while some of the things that we lost or were diminished for us, even if they put a bit of a monkey wrench in your overall plan, you really did gain a lot of things as well. And I think that that's really important to remember. So I told you before that some of the foods I didn't mention just because they're kind of specialty. There are a lot of products that have been added as well. Where you can find these is if you open up your Monash app, you like open it up to the welcome homepage, hit food guide, and then it's going to open up that list of like fruits and vegetables and dairy. Scroll down to the bottom and it's going to say new foods and updated foods. This is where you're going to find all of this information. If you're in the elimination phase or you're in the re-challenge phase, you want to like set a task on your phone or like a reminder in your calendar to take a cruise through here every couple of weeks, because Monash is always adding things, that's always updating. And if you're in the elimination phase or the re-challenge phase, you want to make sure that you're following the low FODMAP diet proper so that you are holding those, I don't like the word clean, but we're holding empty containers so that when we do your re-challenges, we know there's only one variable on your plate right now, if that makes sense, okay? So question number 2, why all of a sudden changes? Like when Monash announced the strawberries and grapes, my DMs were flooded, my inbox was flooded. And like, I love questions from you guys. I love it when you guys reach out and say you need help with something or you're not sure how to adjust something, like keep that coming. But then to have a couple of weeks later, have the tomatoes and the peppers, like again, like everything was just flooded. Like, why is this happening? People feeling frustrated, people feeling overwhelmed. But like, I totally get it. Like I said, I was in the elimination phase, answering all of your things, being like, I don't know how we're handling tomatoes. I still have to update all of these like recipes in my handouts. And like, I don't even know what we're doing yet. I do not have a game plan. That has changed. I'm going through and updating things as quickly as possible. But oh my gosh, I was also like, thrown off my socks. But why are all these changes happening? Well, first of all, somebody asked me if FODMAPs were a scam. Let me just reassure you, FODMAPs are just highly fermentable foods. They pull in excess water. And we know, yes, FODMAPs do these things. And we know, yes, these things can be troublesome for people with IBS. So what is going on here? First of all, Monash's goal is really to give you the most up-to-date information possible. That's why they created the app, because they understand not everybody has access to somebody who's FODMAP trained, whether that's a dietitian or a nutritionist or a coach. Not everybody's going to have access to this. The low FODMAP diet is still relatively new. Like it's just showing up here in North America, right? And so we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the people, we don't have the training. It's not on everybody's radar. And so it's really hard, especially here in North America, to find somebody who's FODMAP trained who can help you with this. Monash understands, they want you to have this information. And so they created the Monash University app so you would have that up-to-date information at all times. As soon as it's published, it's in your app. So what is happening is because Monash has been putting information in this database for so long, like I started in 2016, there was almost nothing in the app back then. Like we really were kind of like bootstrapping it back then. But because Monash tested those foods so long ago, and because community members have been updating sort of Monash saying like, hey, like I know like there was like Bananagate in 2017 where suddenly bananas were the first thing that did this little topsy-turvy flip. Where they used to be the same, eat freely, and now they're like, oh, sorry, like we meant ripe ones, or sorry, unripe ones, they have to be this size, and you can have like one. And then if they're ripe, you can have like a third of them. That was the first thing that ever did a little flip on us. And what had happened was so many community members had mentioned to Monash through like social media, through emailing, through them working with clients, that bananas were really bothering people, that they went back and retested them again. And they were like, oh, shoot, we did an oops, or bananas did something weird and now they're testing differently. The same thing had been happening with strawberries and peppers. It might have also been happening with tomatoes. I can't remember now. But community members had been reporting and eating these specific low FODMAP foods, and they seem to be reacting the same way that other foods, like I'm getting the same response that I would from other foods that I'm sensitive to. And so Monash always puts those on their priority list. Like, we believe your bodies, like, let us see if something changed. This is why there are also additional notes in the Monash app, like this is high in capsaicin, which can cause heartburn, or this is a known gut irritant, and just be aware that this like generally causes stomach upset. And so Monash really is sort of out to support you in whatever way it can. The problem, though, is that as they're continuing to update this information, it's getting more and more complicated, right? So we're seeing things that used to be one group are now 2 groups or 3 groups, right? Like when I started, peanuts were GOS and now they're fructose. Like, it doesn't all make sense. But what's happening is they really are going back to the beginning and testing foods again. And that is because FODMAPs change over time. Like, we're learning this more and more as they get access to produce from around the world, products from around the world. We really are starting to understand that foods evolve over time and what's in them evolves over time. And so we're going to need to keep testing. And we need to give Monash a lot of credit for this, that they're really trying to keep their information as true and updated as possible. They're willing to go back and retest things that they tested already, just to make sure that that information is still accurate, because you're relying on it in order to run your low FODMAP diet. So one of the questions that I've heard a couple of times in my inbox is, do these updates apply to everybody? I hear a lot of people asking me, even like, just conversations in the dietetics community, are tomatoes from Canada the same as tomatoes from Europe? Like, probably not, right? But people are asking, like, does that mean that when they say they've updated tomatoes and they've updated peppers and they've updated strawberries, like, are they talking about my produce? Because Monash is all the way over in Australia. Are they testing their produce and their produce has changed? So one thing you need to keep in mind is that while Monash University itself is in Australia and their lab is in Australia, they have created a network of partners that are all over the world. And so they are constantly testing produce from everywhere, right? They have labs kind of everywhere. They're getting more and more over time, and it's really giving them a wider network, bigger access to local produce, so that they can do things like, define what is bred in Europe versus what is bred in like Canada, for example. Like, I love this example in particular. Because if you look up bread and you have your filter set to Europe, bread is high in fructans. If you are in North America and you have your filter set to North America, it's high in fructan and fructose. So they are separating out for us, produce, products, all of these things. Like, it's based on regulations, it's based on like our climate, all of these things kind of impact what FODMAPs are in your food. And Monash really is trying to separate out for you what is true, like what is true for a food, and also what is true for that food where you are, if that makes sense. So if you haven't used your filter before, I believe it's in the food guide. So again, homepage food guide, in the settings, you can tell the app what country you're in. It'll change the serving sizes for you. So like in Canada, they're in grams. In the United States, they're in ounces. I think also in Europe, they're in grams. I could be wrong. I haven't used the European filter for a while, but you can filter out and it'll show you information that is relevant to you, where you are, if that makes sense. Okay. So we talked about, our FODMAPs are a real thing. They definitely are. We talked about, do these sort of updates apply to everybody? Yes, they do. And it's because Monash is definitely testing things from all of the different countries. And these are kind of global changes that we're seeing being announced. So let's talk for a second about why these changes are happening. Like, why all of a sudden are foods flipping groups, or are foods that were free now high in FODMAPs, kind of inaccessible to us in sort of our day-to-day living and the way that we've structured our diet currently. So like I said, Monash can now test foods from all over the world. Produce especially, they've noticed, is different in different countries, and that makes total sense because we use different seeds and we have different farming practices, we use different fertilizers, we have different climates. So all of those things make sense, and all of those things do impact the content, the FODMAP content of your food. Okay, so we've got things like changes in environment are going to globally impact foods. Okay, so that's things like drought, that's things like increases in temperatures, which we're seeing all over the world. We're not going to get into that. That is not the conversation that we're having. But we've seen changes in farming practices, partially because of the changes that we're seeing globally. But but that's like the type and the amount of fertilizer being used. Those are irrigation practices, so sort of how farmers are taking care of their crops, which seeds they're using, so like which type of plant they're trying to grow. And then of course, crops can actually adapt to the environment themselves, which I think is super neat, and we're going to talk about in 1 second. But when it comes to sort of which seeds farmers are using in the first place, we have determined that consumers actually prefer sweet fruits. So things like strawberries and grapes, they're finding that people are just buying the sweeter versions. And so it makes total sense that farmers are going to grow the sweeter versions of those, if that makes sense, okay? So farmers are choosing to get sweeter fruits, and lo and behold, sweeter fruits are higher in fructose. And so what we tested like 15, 20 years ago, when we were not, exclusively farming these super sweet fruits, it would make sense that if we went and tested them again, we're going to have grapes, which I prefer sweeter. I don't know about you. Strawberries, which again, I prefer sweeter. I don't know about you. But it would make sense that these more consistently sweet varieties are going to be higher in fructose. Okay. So also, we talked about this a second ago, crops have the ability to change their chemical structure when they are stressed out. I think this is the coolest thing ever. My gut does not think it's so cool, but I just think this is super neat. And so bear with me while I nerd out for 1 second, because this is going to kind of help you understand what's happening here. So we have the plant. The plant is, of course, made up of cells, and it turns out that fructans actually help with the structural integrity of cells. Okay, so when the plant is stressed out, or when it's going through drought, or when there's disease or there's pests, plants will automatically, well, some of them, plants often will increase their fructose in order to survive. It's a survival mechanism, okay? So as we're, again, seeing these climate changes, it's getting drier, there's sort of less moisture in the air, there's less rain, all of these things, we're seeing different diseases come out and different pests come out based on, what are we, I've like lost the word for it. Roundup, you know the thing. Pesticides, there we go. What kind of pesticides are we using? How do plants have to deal with that? What is the environment around these plants, sort of based on what is going on? It makes total sense that plants would need to sort of up their game a little bit, and they're doing this with fructans. And so this is why we're seeing a whole bunch of things pop up with fructan now. So another thing is how foods are transported and stored, okay? So I don't know if you know this, but many plants are actually picked when they're not quite ripe yet, and then they're stored in a temperature-controlled environment so that they don't ripen anymore until they're ready to go to the store, and then they're artificially ripened, okay? Oh, sorry, we had a noise outside. Crisis. So these plants are kind of sitting in this artificial environment. It's often quite cold. Pancake, fun. We're going to have a crisis. Okay, so plants are kept in these cold storage environments, and we know that cold storage can also increase fructans. And so we have these plants that have survived droughts and pests and all of these things. They're increasing their fructans, and then they're stored in a cold environment. And again, they're increasing fructans. We can also see an increase in fructose in these environments. And that's because in cold temperatures, longer carbohydrate chains, so like those that we see in starch, begin to break down. Okay, so this is like what we see in bananas, where an unripe banana full of starch is low FODMAP, and a ripe banana is high FODMAP. It's because as these starch chains begin to unravel or they begin to break apart, smaller sugar chains are kind of popping out. And these smaller sugar chains are often fructan and fructose. Okay, so fructose is one molecule. If one molecule pops up, like, okay, now it's a fructose. If a small chain pops off, okay, now it's a fructan. Does that make sense? So like as we're having these things sit in cold storage, they're already full of these things. We've already got sweeter fruits. We've already got fruits and vegetables that are increasing in their fructan. Now we're sort of sitting them in this perfect storm where they're beginning to break down as they're sitting in cold storage, and those levels are just going to get higher and higher. And again, this doesn't apply to all fruits and vegetables. It's going to depend on kind of what chemicals were in there already, kind of waiting to break down. But this is why we're seeing particularly foods either flipping to fructan, or they're, something that used to be one group is now this and fructan or this and fructose. This kind of is unraveling the mystery a little bit about where these extra groups are coming from, if that makes sense, okay? So big question, what do these changes mean for you? And I see that question there. So what do these changes mean for you? Now, if you are in the elimination or re-challenge phase right now, so you are either getting ready to test or you are in the middle of your tests, you need to incorporate these changes, okay? So That means you need to go to the Monash app, you need to find the recommended low FODMAP serving size, how that has changed, and you need to respect that, if that makes sense, okay? Because again, we're trying to keep those containers empty, and Monash has alerted us, hey, if you were eating 5 cherry tomatoes, some of those are going in that bucket and you are not testing in a clean environment anymore, okay? So again, if you're in the elimination challenge, if you're in the elimination phase or you're in the re-challenge phase, we really do want to modify what you're doing right now to make sure that you're getting the best results possible during testing, okay? Now, if you're in the, somebody called it this on Instagram and I love it, if you're in the live your life phase, so personalization phase, I'm calling it live your life phase from now on though. So if you're in the live your life phase or personalization and your gut has been going a bit wonky, so it was feeling good for a while, or you had like good symptom control for a while, and now it's kind of feeling off, take a cruise through the app, right? See if any of the foods that you normally eat have changed. Maybe kick up your food journal again, see if you can spot a pattern. It totally could be that there's something wonky, something that did work for you has flipped or is now higher or whatever, like let's figure it out. But if your symptoms are under control, nothing changes for you, nothing at all, okay? Our goal, like the goal of the personalization phase, is that eventually you just stop following Monash on Instagram, right? You stop subscribing to their updates. It just doesn't impact you. If your gut happens to go out of whack, like if you are going to do a journal, we do a food, mood, and poop journal. So like what I want you to do is like, I want you to track your sleep, I want you to track how you're feeling in addition to what you're eating, because if your sleep is off and you didn't realize like, oh, I've been getting like an hour less sleep every night, we want to try fixing that, because we know that mucked up sleep also goes in your FODMAP buckets, right? If you've been kind of getting this like low level stress at work, we want to make sure that we're addressing that as well, because that can also go in your FODMAP bucket. So before we start mucking around with your food, because we know that that can cause like obsessive behaviors. We know that because you eat so many times a day, like we don't want your focus to be on there if that's not what the issue is, right? So first we check these external things. If those are doing well, you've also been recording your food this whole time. And now we can go back and check, be like, cool, I'm looking back 24, 72 hours and seeing if I can spot a pattern on days that I'm not feeling well. Is it one of these sort of newly updated foods, okay? And again, like even if you get rid of the Monash app on your phone, you can always download it again. It's in your cloud. Like you pay for it one time, you have access to it forever, at least for now. So like get it off your phone if you don't need it. And if something goes wonky and you're looking through your food journal and you're like, no, everything looks fine to me, download the app and see if something's been updated and it applies to you, okay? Okay, so let me see. Karen asks, would it make a difference if you grow your own strawberries and bell peppers? I don't believe that that would make a difference in the FODMAP in the FODMAP content of your food, because we're talking about foods grown from seeds. And I think that, so here's something that you need to know then to answer that question. When Monash is testing produce, for example, they will go to 5 different stores, literally, they'll go to 5 different places and they will select 3 samples of food from that place. So if you were going to do strawberries, they would go and they would buy 3 boxes of strawberries from 5 different stores, bring them all back to the lab, like disintegrate them, put them into water, and then do a standardized test. So they run them through all their machines. So what this means is, unless you're talking about like a specific brand of strawberry, which Monash has not specified in their app, we have to assume that they're the same. Like just because they're grown in your soil versus a farmer's soil isn't necessarily going to change the FODMAP content of the food, because you still live in the same climate, you're still using the same seeds, you're still using the same fertilizer, well, maybe not exactly the same, but I don't believe that growing them on your own would make any impact on regionally, like sort of peppers or strawberries or anything like that, because technically you're making the same thing, you're just putting in your own labor. I have never heard in the research that I've done, I've never heard anything from Monash that making them on your own impacts the FODMAP content, if that makes sense. No problem. Okay, so we talked about kind of what has changed in the app. And again, you can go through and just look at that like new foods and updated foods. Again, just put a reminder in your phone if you're in the re-challenger elimination phase, just to go through and make sure that you're still compliant. If you are working with a dietitian, like someone who's Monash certified, if you're working with a health coach or nutritionist, you can ask them, does this impact your plan for me? Some of these have like very small servings now. So if you're only allowed to have 6 grapes, that should be something that you're adjusting. If you're only allowed to have 3 cherry tomatoes and the maximum is now 5, that is something that you should be adjusting, because those portions are so small. There isn't a ton of wiggle room there. But if you're, if the person that you're working with is like, you know what, I think that it's fine if you have tomatoes, or based on your unique body, I'm not really worried about fructose for you, so you can go ahead and keep eating those. Follow the instructions that they give you. These updates are mostly for people who are following the low FODMAP diet out of the box, which is just sort of following it by the app, working with the Monash pamphlet. Because like I said, we are absolutely aware that not everyone has access to somebody who is Monash trained. Like that is a-okay, all right? If you follow the low FODMAP diet to the letter, stick with the green steps, you are still going to get results, okay? But if you are working with somebody, you can ask them, how do these changes impact me? And they should be able to give you a really specific plan, and it's okay if you follow that, okay? Now, okay, so we talked about the actual foods that changed. We talked about why are all of these sudden changes kind of happening. So we talked about the environment. We talked about how food is stored. What else did we talk about? We talked about what those changes mean for you. One thing that I do want to talk about, which I don't think we're talking about enough, is that FODMAPs are not your only option, okay? We talked about this a little bit already, but FODMAPs are not the only thing that go in those buckets, right? We know sleep goes in those buckets. We know anxiety goes in those buckets. We know stress goes in those buckets, right? If you have other illnesses, they might be mucking up those buckets. It's alarming to me how much we focus on food. You have to eat all day, every day, right? Having you micromanage something that you need to be alive, and hearing more and more people are having this recommended to them as the first step, right? Oh, you have IBS. This first step is I want you to take all of these foods out of your diet, right? I want you to follow this really crazy thing that's feeling more complicated by the day. Like I messaged my dietitian because I was in the elimination phase where they're like, oh, all these free things. Like, no, I was having like a work existential crisis because I was like, how do I fix all of these recipes? How do I fix all these handouts like fast enough that you guys can use them again? I messaged my dietitian and was like, I started this in 2016 when there were like 15 foods in this app. And somehow it feels like there's less foods now. I don't understand what's happening. Like it's just getting more and more complicated. Like I'm having clients come in who are just like upside down with all of these changes. It's frustrating. It's overwhelming. You have every right to be angry. And I don't know why this is being recommended first, because there are so many alternatives that can give you equal results, right? It used to be FODMAPs were kind of the only thing. Now we're getting into like nervous system things. So there are actually two schools of thought when it comes to sort of managing IBS symptoms. So first of all, IBS is really an issue with the way that the gut behaves, right? We know that there's no chemical issues, there's no hormonal issues, no structural issues where there's like a problem with the actual functioning of the intestines. IBS is really how your body responds to stimulation. So if I ate something and my husband ate something, his body would be blissfully unaware that it has gas production, that it has excess water in it. Like everybody malabsorbs polyols. Why is my body sounding the alarm and he's like licking his chicken finger sauce off his fingers? Like it doesn't make sense. What we've discovered through more research, through like brain studies, through nervous system studies, is that something has happened and it's nothing that you did, right? I want to make it clear that it is nothing that you did. You did not cause this for yourself. Something has happened in your body, an event, an illness, something has happened where something has flipped and your brain is interpreting things that are normal signals as danger, as a problem, as something you need to be aware of. And so we're getting pain, we're getting cramping, we're getting all of these things as your body tries to fix a problem that is normal behavior, if that makes sense, okay? So there are two schools of thought on how we manage this issue in an IBS body. And the first one is the one that you guys are most familiar with, because it's the one we talk about all the time, and that is taking away the physical stimulation. So this is where you find like food restrictions, you do re-challenges, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to control what goes into your body so that we can control or reduce your body's response to that stimulus, if that makes sense. The second school of thought, which is now found to be equally as effective for many people at the 6-month mark, is we're going to change how your body responds to the signal. So we're going to get you back to that sort of starter kit. We're going to reboot you, and we're going to have your body change the way that it's responding to that information from your gut. So this is where you're going to find nervous system techniques. This is where the the Nerva app is from. That is gut-directed hypnotherapy. Again, trying to rewire that nervous system for you. This is where we get like CBT techniques. This is where we get coaching. What we're trying to do is we're trying to change the way that your brain and your gut are speaking to one another. And by changing sort of how those signals will feel in your body, we're going to kind of train you how to flip back into that rest and digest phase. Because when you're eating and your body's like, this food is danger, which is terrible because you need food to be alive. So this thing you need to be alive is now dangerous because I don't know if this is a trigger. I don't know what's going to happen to my body. I don't know how to control all of these variables. And if I fail, I'm going to wreck my body, or I'm going to have symptoms, or I'm not going to be able to go to work tomorrow. And then all of that stress is filling up those FODMAP buckets, if that makes sense, right? So by teaching your body, this cookie is a cookie and you need to calm down, and those gurgles are normal and we're okay, this is safe, and I'm going to take care of you and we are all right, and sort of rewiring how your brain is responding to those signals. Like, that's just gas, that's normal. Okay, that was a little bit of water. This is cool, we can handle this. We're going to be able to get you to flip back into that rest and digest stage so that you're digesting your food properly. You're regulating your motility, so your bowel is moving at the rate that it's supposed to. It's different for everybody, but your body kind of has a rhythm that it likes to work on. And so by changing how your body's responding, keeping you out of that flight or fight phase, that was a tongue twister, where your body is sort of pulling all of that energy and pulling all of that blood away from your digestive tract to get ready to like fight off some bears. That is not a real thing. Getting you back into that rest and digest stage, making sure that your body is able to digest your food properly. We're going to reduce bloating. We're going to reduce pain. We're going to prevent nervous system flare-ups. Some of my clients describe like if their boss is yelling at them, or if they get handed a project last minute, or they have to make a presentation and they're feeling nervous, their gut can flare up. They get symptoms, they get, bloating, they get pain, they get cramping. It can be debilitating. And it's caused by these stressful and anxiety-provoking situations. So again, by focusing on the nervous system and by really helping regulate sort of how it feels to be in your body, retraining what those signals mean when your brain gets them, we're going to try and teach your body that food isn't dangerous. These feelings that you're having aren't a sign of danger, and sort of try and help your body avoid that danger response when you're doing something that you need to be alive. And I'm not 100% sure, like I said, why we're starting with the FODMAP diet, which is kind of revving up that feeling that food is dangerous and food is not okay. And if I can't manage this food, like my body's not going to be okay and I'm never going to get better, when there's this alternate way of sort of looking at this issue, this problem of like my body is misinterpreting these signals. So instead of sort of focusing on not giving your body those signals, why don't we just reboot and change what those signals mean? Now, don't get me wrong. Both of these ideas are valuable, okay? Both of these schools of thought are helpful to you. I am not like poo-pooing the low FODMAP diet. It changed my life, right? But working with my clients, like I've worked with so many human beings now that I have found some interesting FODMAP math of my own. And that is that 40% of my clients, I literally went and looked it up because I was so curious. 40% of my clients have come out with FODMAP sensitivity. So out of everyone that I've seen, 40% of people actually had like a group or a couple of foods that they truly responded to. Everyone else, no sensitivities. We always find something else. So out of the clients with no sensitivity, so they did not have any FODMAP related issues, some of them had been in the elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet for up to 3 years. 3 years in the elimination phase. So 3 years of like a restricted diet, buying like expensive low FODMAP products, skipping events, or having to bring their own food. It wasn't benefiting them in any way. They didn't even have consistent symptom control because food wasn't the main trigger for them, but because they started in that place, when it wasn't working, they just kept touching their food, right? Well, this isn't working, I have to restrict more, or I have to restrict more, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or I thought this was okay, but I'm still responding. It gets so confusing. And again, you have to eat all day long to be alive, right? And so I find it interesting that we tend to focus on food so much. And I guess it gives us a sense of control because I can choose what I put in my body to a certain extent, right? If I want to feel better, I can decide that I'm not going to eat that, or I can decide that I'm only going to eat this. And it does give us that sense of control. Like we're doing something, it's almost busy work. And like I said, some people do have true FODMAP sensitivities. I'm not saying that that's not a real thing. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but many people don't, right? 72% of my clients have reported that their symptoms have been directly linked to stress or anxiety, right? So that includes people who have FODMAP sensitivities, that includes people who don't have FODMAP sensitivities, but they have noticed like an actual link. We've got them on the elimination phase, they're living their lives, and they're like, hey, like a stressful thing happened at work, boom, symptoms. I've been eating the same thing that I've been eating all week, this is symptoms, or these feel so familiar, I'm starting to wonder if it is food, if that makes sense, right? With my clients who do have true FODMAP sensitivities, most of them also know that the FODMAP sensitivities get worse when they're stressed out, right? And that tells me that stress is in their FODMAP buckets. We know that's a thing, and it's limiting their ability to process high FODMAP foods. Okay, so when I give these clients tools to manage stress and anxiety, like at work, in their relationships, at home, we notice that their symptoms are more consistently under control and they have fewer food restrictions. So even people who do need some assistance in the sort of diet side of things, they can limit less when their stress and anxiety feels under control. So I want to propose to you, I know that the internet is filling up with people talking about FODMAPs. When I started, I was like one voice in a tiny chorus of people being like, you're okay, we're gonna do this. And I'm not going anywhere. I am still your FODMAP bestie. I'm still happy to help you with that. But I wanna offer you something else, okay? Because if you are here because you feel like the low FODMAP diet is your only option, or someone gave you like a FODMAP pamphlet and was like, I don't know, good luck, or your healthcare team kind of ditched you, which happens a shocking amount of times, and this is the best that Google had to offer, I want you to know that there are other things that you can try first, okay? And they don't involve like crazy food restrictions or journaling every gurgle in your body or feeling alienated or isolated when you're out with your friends. So if you're thinking about starting a low FODMAP program, or if you finish the low FODMAP program and you're like, I still do not have consistent symptom control, or things are okay one day and they're not okay the other day, I would love to invite you to one of my group coaching calls, okay? So I have these new pods. They are a 12-week group coaching program, and they are going to be designed to change the way it feels to live in your body. So in sort of enveloping the second school of thought. In the pods, you're going to learn how to flip your body back into rest and digest on command so that you can properly digest your meals. You can get better sleep. You can have more energy. You're going to know how to cope with stressful situations in the moment to help you prevent to help you prevent or calm stress or anxiety induced flare-ups. And I'm going to teach you how to rewire your brain, right? We're just going to reboot you so that it responds differently to the information that it's receiving, and you can feel confident in your body again. Now, I've talked about these pods a little bit in my newsletter already. Registration for them closes tomorrow at midnight, and there are a few dates and time options available because I know you guys are kind of from everywhere. You can learn more about the pods and register at this link. Let me send it to you. Yeah, so you can register right there. You can check out, it's got more information about what they are, the cost, everything you need to know to hop in. Just so you know, the pods are limited to 6 people each. And that's just so that I make sure that you have my full attention, you have time to sort of digest and really sort of put the skills and tools that I teach you in your body. You have time to learn from other people's experience and really get what you need. So if you do want to see, I think the Wednesday at 11 a.m. is almost full. So if you want that one, make sure you hop in right away. But there are 2 other options as well, and they have a little bit more space. So don't worry, if you want in, I will get you in. But if you're not sure, just so you know, I'm not sure when the next pods are going to be opening. I'm in school right now. And so I'm not sure how much time I have to sort of invest in more pods than this. So if you're not able to come right now, that's a-okay, don't take it personally. But I'm not sure when the next group of pods is going to open. So I've left the link here for you. If you're interested, definitely check it out. And if not, I hope that this webinar was helpful for you, sort of learning more about Monash's changes and what they mean for you. So have a great night, and thank you so much for coming.